Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Warhoundcast. I'm joined by Max.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening, good morning, whenever you're listening to this.
And we're going to be chatting today about the Dark Angels. I think it's fair to say have raised a few concerns amongst the sort of general populace.
This was the army I played when I first got back into 40k, maybe sort of three and a bit years ago, and they were pretty rubbish back then, but not so much anymore.
No, it's interesting looking back because when they came out, at least in 8th edition, they basically they didn't come in with a splash. The weapons for the Dark Age stuff was pretty nice. But I think they got released the same week or the week after Blood Angels.
Yeah.
And they got forgotten about pretty quickly. I don't think, apart from the times I played you at the club, I was going to say played. I'm not sure I played against your Dark Angels, actually. I barely saw anyone play Dark Angels for the entirety of 8th edition.
Having said that, I went when Ritual of the Damned dropped, I then dug my Dark Angels out and was running a pretty much all Ravenwing list with a couple of boot choices. And before lockdown, I think because we were doing a tournament at the club, I probably went 7-0 with pretty much all Ravenwing list. So Ritual of the Damned gave him a shot in the arm, but it was really the only build was Ravenwing.
Yeah, I remember I think it was your first episode you were talking about that book in particular, and it was doing a lot of damage to things. You pretty much tabled a 1,000 Suns army in 2 turns or something, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was oppressively good. I absolutely hammered quite a meta list at the time, which was Raven Guard successor with a bunch of Centurions. So again, pre Centurion nerf. The guy called that turn 4 because I just obliterated his army. It was unbelievably strong. So much shooting. You didn't really want to get in combat. You didn't need to. The rate of firepower coming out of that army was pretty insane.
Yeah, and it was a slightly different style to a lot of the other Marine armies, which was nice because they tended to be at the time very Centurion heavy or sort of Iron Hands gunline type things typically. And there was a few Blood Angels smashing around with whatever assault unit they wanted to run up and hit you really hard in the face, but there was nothing quite like that sort of Raven Wing build out there.
Well, again, I played a Blood Angels list and won that again, almost tabling opponents. It was very strong, and I kind of wonder what kind of impact it would have had on the competitive meta had lockdown not happened, because it was really good.
Yeah. But before we start jumping in, have you had a chance to do any hobby stuff since our last time we spoke?
Yes. Yeah, I've been furiously painting Death Guard. Yeah, I've kind of set myself a challenge of not buying any new stuff until I'd painted everything I'd got, and then 2 armies that I'm quite invested in drop within the space of 2 weeks of each other. So that's rather put paid to that New Year's resolution. But yeah, been furiously painting up Death Guard, and with Dark Angels. I kind of, when I got back into it, I kind of bought a bit of everything, and nothing was terribly well optimized. So I've just been ripping lots of arms off of Deathwing Terminators, retooling them, and they'll be going in a bath to strip them so I can repaint them, because my paintings come on quite a bit in 3 years. So that's kind of what I've been doing. So lots of cream coloured Terminators.
My paintings technically come along a bit, but it still remains in the dreadfully awful category. But
What about you?
So I've tried to do the same, not buying anything until I've got things painted up. And I've just about been holding to that. Not playing any games is a wonderful thing for not buying models, at least for me. I know it's gone different ways with different people. And I've got some warped talons. I've got sort of 2/3 painted up, which I got when I got the Death Guard book. I want to go and get some light drones. So I've got the double flamer variant. I don't have the flesh mower variant. And I've been playing a few tabletop simulator games, and I've really been liking the drones. Just as something that can go up and contest things turn one.
Well, they just give you something a bit different that the army's got, which is a bit of speed.
Yeah.
I think that's where their value comes from.
Yeah, exactly for that reason. They can go up to an objective, contest it, and the fact that they can intervene to bully scouts and particularly sort of marine forward deployers off objectives potentially, or at least starting to force them to use transhuman to keep the point for a turn.
Yeah,
really valuable.
It's interesting. Like lots of people have talked up sort of Rhino Rush, Death Guard, but I feel like they're dead points.
Yes.
If you've got the flesh mode dudes going up and being a pain and getting close, then they have to be dealt with, and then that buys the rest of the army time to steadily advance up. You don't need the rhinos so much. That's just like, if you take 3 rhinos, that's 300 points. You in quite an elite army that isn't really doing much. The bloat drones serve the same purpose, are more resilient, and more killy.
Yeah, and it's been fun. I've been trying all the different plague companies, trying lots of different builds. I think I only haven't tried the I want to say the ferryman, the demon engine one, and the one where you get extra damage on your flamers. Basically, I haven't tried those two, but I've tried the others in various combinations. And Death Guard book, yeah, I could. When we sort of talked about the strats and things and being like, oh, they're not the greatest in the world, but they're fine. I can see why they've done things like that and not given them Death to the False Emperor, because it is a really good book, and there's got a lot more builds in it than I thought they did. I thought they'd be like cool Terminator spam or Demon Engine spam or Mortarian plus stuff. But yeah, I've been trying a lot of different things with it, and all of it is felt really good.
Yeah.
And I can see why they took away a few things, and why it's just the extra wound on something that's toughness 5. I think is such a big thing to buff to the army, and it's something that I think a lot of people sort of overlook. They're like, cool, we're just getting the Space Marine treatment. It's about time we got that, and kind of viewed it as a wash. But when you've got that T5, when you've got a way to reduce damage, it's been so huge. And going back to your original point, I haven't felt the need to add in those rhinos or things, because it's like, cool, I'm just going to run them up the field because there's only so much. You've got other targets for your anti-tank anyway. If I put something in rhinos, you're just going to be shooting them at terminators. So they're not holding the fire, they're not taking the fire on the same way. And yeah, I've tried marine spam, I've tried this poxwalker spam, I've tried a few dread engines. And yeah, it's a really good book.
Yeah, like 3 rhinos, I think is bang on 10 more plague marines. So
yeah, I'll take 10 more plague marines.
10 more plague marines.
I don't think plague marines are the best things in the book, but they're still good.
Yeah.
And if you want to build a list around having lots of plague marines, it's entirely possible. And I wouldn't bother giving them any upgrades either. I tried to put as many special melee weapons in there as possible, and it was fine. And then the squad next to them that didn't have anything and just went, cool, we're going to stab you up with plague knives, did just as well, basically. But, so it's like, cool, just do that. If I want to buff them, I'll have the chap that gives them a 6-up mortal wound thing.
Yeah.
That'll do me. Don't need anything else. So I don't need to go and buy a bajillion more flails, which is quite nice.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting how they balance the sort of the weapon loadouts you could have in units, but ultimately probably quite sensible. And you're not going to want to sink too many points into it at one unit in particular.
Yeah, it's a threat overload army. There will be weapons that can deal with them very well, but it's very hard to have an army of weapons that deals with them very well.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, that's been interesting. I mean, I am again, I suppose, unlike you, probably because I'm not doing tabletop simulator, the lack of games has, has meant I have more time to buy and build and paint models. So the temptation has been far too great because it's I'm building an army, can't do anything with it. Oh, great, well I'll build another one. So yeah, it's not been kind on the wallet.
Yeah, there's going to be that first moment after lockdown gets lifted, the first time back at the club, and I'm going to be like, aha, I want to go and buy all the Death Guard stuff I haven't. I want to buy more Chaos. Then I'll probably be tempted to buy another Marine Army. Well, a Marine Army for the millionth time. Be like, no, must resist.
Well, I think my problem's going to be knowing what I want to play with for that first game.
Yes.
Like, do I want to play with the Death Guard army that I have multiple options for? Do I want to play Ravenwing? Do I want to play Deathwing? I've got a Sisters army that's primed and ready to be painted up. And my sort of Space Marine sort of flexi chapter effort as well. I have so I've got literally no idea what I want to play with first, and I almost run the risk of playing a different army every week. But then that's fun, right? Bit of variety. I've never gone to that many tournaments. It's always been about having a bit of fun. For me, it was just nice with the Ravenwing at the back end of 8th that I was doing some decent damage. I've always run quite fluffy lists. Like when I did play Raven Guard, it was pretty much all Phobos or jump units. Like there were no Centurions or anything that didn't feel fluffy. But if I can run an all Terminator list and that is fluffy and also quite good, then that's pretty cool.
It is. So that leads on quite nicely to the Dark Angels, how they can organise their detachments. Because this is something that had been going away but has come back. The idea that if your warlord is in either a outrider or a vanguard, is it?
Yeah.
Detachment, all of your bikes / terminators respectively gain objectives secured, and you get your command points back as if it was a battalion.
Yeah. Crucially, it's not all of the units. So, for example, with Ravenwing, it's just Outriders and Ravenwing Bike Squadron. So Black Knights don't get objective secured. And for Terminators, it's Deathwing Terminator squads, but not the Deathwing Knights. They don't get objective secured. So you do need to still have a bit of balance. You just can't go crazy on the Knights. Also, I mean, for Ravenwing, the Black Knights are elite choices, so you're only got 2 slots to play with there. So you're going to be taking max 2 units of those, and then because you take those, the special characters don't take up a slot, but that's you're going to max out on Black Knights there, and also their survivability and their damage output is not that much better. Well, their survivability is probably slightly better than Plasma Inceptors, but their damage output is way down because it's only 2 shots per bike versus between 2 and 6 on a Plasma Inceptor, depending on what you're firing into. So they're in a slightly tricky spot, but the good thing is there are lots of other options now. You're not just sort of playing into that sort of Black Knight blob.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Black Knights become more appealing if Plasma Scepters get another nerf, because they are such a good unit, even with the various nerfs and the very mild nerf they had. So, and I really like the Black Knights. Their melee damage output is also something not to sniff at, which is a point in their favour over the Plasma Scepters. But
no, it's not bad, and they've also got quite a cool strat where you can charge in, hit a unit, and then immediately fall back, so you don't then get hit back. It depends how much damage I suppose you've done. Then if you've not killed enough stuff, you can just fall away onto an objective, which is quite cool, and not take the return hits. I mean, if you just clean through a unit, you don't have to then burn those CPs, but it's nice flexibility, and you can even do it in your opponent's turn. Spend the CP to interrupt if something doesn't fight against them first. Again, fight and then fall away and don't take the damage. So there's some quite good plays there that give you extra movement and sort of reduce the incoming damage you're taking. I think it's even more effective in your opponent's turn to do that, because then you can just shoot them the next turn and charge back in.
Yeah, especially with knights focused on objectives, the ignoring damage is really good just by not being there. But I think the extra movement is so big.
Yeah, it's huge.
Especially if it's like, if it's the last combat of the turn, the opponent's not going to get to react. You can see, okay, they've only got 2 models there, which aren't obsec. I can go and put be on there on my turn and get a nice 5-point swing here or there.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and the Dark Angels have a fall back and shoot strat anyway. So if you've got a bunch of units sort of tied up, one's already been hit, interrupt with the other one, they fall back in your opponent's turn and can shoot and charge and do whatever, and then the other unit can fight and then fall back in your turn and still shoot. So they have the mobility is excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, the two, they've really pushed the 2 wings in this book, haven't they? And it's all the old Marine models, which is cool as well. Things like the Outriders and the Blade Guard do get various benefits, but the fact that old school Terminators and the older bike models are getting a lot of love is really cool. So
you can tell how unpopular Dark Angels have been. So I ordered some more Deathwing Terminators, so that I had enough to make a 2,000 point army. I only needed a couple of boxes, but you can tell how unpopular they're being because the packaging was still from 7th edition. It wasn't even 8th edition packaging, and that was direct from GW. So they've clearly got quite a few of them knocking around.
The last time I bought some Chaos Marine bikes, I had a look on the sprue and it had 1999 on it. So I'd I always find it chuckle when you get something that's models which are that old. But before we delve any further, should we talk about the two big keywords of the book, Inner Circle and Jink?
Yeah, definitely. So Jink is something everyone will be familiar with. It's in 8th. It used to be a 4-up invuln if you advance. Then when their little sort of holdover supplement came out sort of when the Space Marine Codex dropped, that changed to it's a 4-up if you advance, a 5-up if you just move. So you start the game, everything starts the game with a 5-up invuln, which is pretty cool, because you haven't not moved, right? But the really cool thing is now you get that on things in the Space Marine Codex that don't have it if they have the Ravenwing keyword. So you'll see lots of notes against things like Outriders, things like Land Speeders. If these are in a Dark Angels army, you get the Ravenwing keyword. Now with this Codex, you now get the Jink ability. So all of your Primaris Speeders and Outriders get it. So yeah, that's fantastic. The very interesting thing with Jink and Inner Circle, which we'll get onto in a minute, is you only get those abilities if you are Dark Angels or you're a successor that takes Inheritors of the Primarch. So you can't sort of do anything janky to take sort of successor traits that will, buff you up even further, to make you even more sort of competitive. You're locked into the Dark Angels chapter tactic, which I think is
So
which I think is interesting. It's also quite fluffy because the whole idea behind the Dark Angels is that, yeah, okay, so they kind of went along with the whole sort of transformation from a legion into chapters, but all of their successes are still very heavily connected to the sort of original chapter, and therefore, if they were to sort of fight in a similar way, you'd imagine that they were basically a legion by any other name, with all of these different chapters pretty much sort of singing from the same hymn sheet.
yeah, I really like them essentially not being able to have a successor have the drink and the inner circle keyword. Um, one of the big advantages of Marines is their ability to sort of double dip. So they get the sort of the core Marine book things, and then they can have their supplement bonuses sort of on top of that. And if you don't like the supplements, you can have a successor instead. So Raven Guard do that very commonly these days. Um, so I like that that's not a thing, and it also, yeah, as you said, ties very well into the fluff. But yeah, Jink, super powerful, really good, but probably not as good as Inner Circle.
No, not quite. Inner Circle is insanely good. I mean, interestingly enough, parts of Inner Circle do affect Ravenwing, so fearless, so never have to take a morale test, which is crazy. On things like Black Knights, again, if you took a big blob of 10, that you're never going to be losing any to morale. But the big bonus is that infantry have permanent transhuman, so you have Terminators with permanent transhuman, which is something no other chapter can get because transhuman physiology is a Primaris only stratagem. So yeah, unbelievably durable Terminators, and like all their characters, all their named characters. So I'll talk about Ezekiel in a bit because I think he's a absolute baller. But they all have it as well. So again, they have permanent transhuman, and you can pay a few points to put it on non-named captains and lieutenants.
Yeah, I was shocked that they kept this from the index, or even when it was announced in the index, because this was a game changer for Marines when it came out. Everyone that's played against Marines knows how powerful this is, and for it to be free on a lot of units and always on is just insanely powerful. We talked last time about how good we thought the Death Guard Terminators are.
Yeah.
And you can make the argument that the Deathwing ones are even tougher than that, albeit there are cases where some is better against one, some is better against the other, especially when you start combining in relics and the like. But yeah, it's hugely powerful, and it's one of those things that, in combination with Death Guard, suddenly makes people go back and look at different ways they have to deal with this.
Yeah. And as per the Ravenwing, you now get it on Blade Guard.
Yes, as if Marine players needed any more reason to buy Blade Guard.
Yeah. So who's got the best Blade Guard in the game? Guilty.
I reckon Blood Angels could still give a very comparable thing, albeit in a more offensive way.
But if one was against the other, yes, they did more attacks, but they wouldn't be wounding on 2s like they would against other Blade Guard. They'd be wounding on 4s.
In a straight duel, I don't think there's another chapter out there that can beat the Blood Angels one. I guess if White Scars are an assault doctrine, they get damaged 3 weapons there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how the maths works out there, but maybe they get it in their favor then.
But again, and we'll probably get onto relics later, but there's a relic you can take that reduces damage on a unit by 1, so you could mitigate the impact of some White Scars coming in. Again, this is kind of sort of comparable matchups, but there are ways for them to with the right buffs completely undo sort of all of everyone else's buffs.
So I think those are the 2 keywords covered nicely. Should we take a look at some of the strats? Because I kind of feel if the Death Guard they were perhaps a bit cautious with the strats, they've certainly pushed the boat out on a couple of the Dark Angels one.
Yeah, it's
And,
interesting. There are a lot less of them,
mm,
a lot less strats,
but they still do have access to the base Marines ones as well.
which is kind of where the trade-off is, right? I don't think that they didn't need anywhere near as many.
No, it's one thing is that the Blood Angels, by most accounts, don't have a particularly good range of strats. They've still got all the Marine strats, and they've got some insane chaps, tactics, things, and everything. But yeah, do you want to pick out a couple that take your fancy?
Yeah. So there are only 2 that are Deathwing specific, and one of them is specific to Deathwing Knights. But that's +1 to wound, to improve and improves armor penetration. So they're strength 8 with their maces. They don't have any minus to hit. You could put the Fury of the First from the Space Marine coats to make them hit on. Oh no, actually they are weapon skill and ballistic skill, weapon skill 2. So they already hit on 2s. And obviously you could put sort of master or chapter master rerolls on them to hit. And then you give them +1 to wound, so they'd be wounding something that's toughness 8 on threes. But there's also a warlord trait that gives an aura of +1 strength. So you could be going into Mortarion and wounding him on 2s. You could be hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s. Even if he's got the -1 on him, you give them the +1 to negate that. So you totally take away the fact that he, deletes all of your reroll abilities. You don't need reroll abilities when you're hitting and wounding on 2s. So that tickled me, especially as their maces aren't a -1 to hit. They're damage 3, which would go to damage 2. But yeah, that's gonna hurt anyone.
Yeah, that one's great. It's interesting because that's straight better than the Death Guard veterans, albeit on a very specific unit and situation, which is fine. I think I'd rather have the Death Guard one still and have the utility of using it more options. Just to sound like a Salty Chaos player for a second there. But yeah, I really like Line Unbreakable.
I think, yeah, that's excellent.
If I was a Dark Angel player, I'd definitely like Line Unbreakable. I'm not sure I'd like playing against it so much. But that's the one where you can't fight in ranks anymore, so you have to be within an inch. You can't be within half an inch of one of your mates.
Yep. I think it's brilliant. Just completely kneecap the number of attacks going into a unit.
Yeah, you think about something like Orcs or Gene Stealer cults.
Yeah.
It's scary enough charging Terminators as it is when you half the attacks in all likelihood. For 1 CP, that's just horrific.
Yeah, it is really, really strong. Yeah, they've got a lot of ways. Like I said with the Ravenwing earlier, the strat to fall back after they've attacked. They've got so many ways to mitigate incoming damage. It just makes them even more tanky.
Any others you want to pick out?
So, I mean, again, Ravenwing have got quite a cool one. If you've, again, going into something like Mortarion, if you really, really need to deal a lot of damage to him, there's a strat that if a land speeder can see it and is within 18, give +1 to hit against that unit for everything in your army, which is very cool. So targeted guidance. Weapons from the Dark Ages back. So again, for all of those against Death Guard, and I'm focusing on those, but they were the boogeymen until this dropped. You're undoing that -1 damage by adding 1 back on, and then against everything else, it's just straight fire. Yeah, they are. They're realistically, there aren't a huge number of strats in here that you're going to see that often. Deathwing Assault has changed from what it was in the original codex. What it was originally was you teleport in, you got to shoot in your movement phase, and then shoot again. And and you could potentially clear some space for something else to drop in. Now it's when you teleport in, you can use this strat, and you have +1 to the attack's wound roll. So if you did that on a big squad of 10 with storm bolts, cyclone missile launchers, that's going to make a mess of something.
Cheeky trick that you can do with that is that you can obviously deep strike them normally.
Yeah.
But you can always teleport Homer to the same spot you're already at if you're more than
no. Dark Angel Deathwing Terminators don't get teleport to homers.
Oh, okay. None of the other variants.
Actually, you could run a normal squad of shooty Terminators from the Space Marine Codex, because they do get the Deathwing keyword. You just have less flexible sort of weapon loadouts, and I think they have a war gear option that is a teleporter Homer. Let me have a quick look. Terminator squad, yeah. So you could do that with a sort of standard Terminator squad from the Codex, rather than having the flexibility of the weapon loadouts. But if you're doing that and you're gearing up for a mega shooting, you're going to have them all with shooting anyway. So it's kind of by the by. I'm just wanting to check the word of that strat to see if it isn't locked into arriving from.
It does call out teleport homers specifically.
Okay.
But the other one that's probably not going to come up a lot, but I think will be super powerful when it does, is the stasis shell. So there's a couple of problems with this, mostly that you need. It's 2 CP for something that you've still got to hit with. So it can just do nothing. I'm also not sure how many Ravenwing models typically have grenade launchers. But
you can put them on the characters,
Hmm.
which again is potentially a slightly more sensible option, because you're not really ever going to be overcharging their plasma talons.
Yes. But if you do that and you do hit, which you're more likely to do than not, then that unit can't fall back. And the ability to, multi-charge something, kill the thing you want to kill, pile into, let's say, a cultist squad that can't move, and then be immune from shooting at a turn is situationally really powerful as well.
It is, but you already have this ability on the Dark Talon, both with its stasis bomb and its Rift Vortex. So it's Rift Cannon. So would you pay 2 CP to do it off of a I mean, if you wanted to do it on multiple units, then I mean, you could technically then, with a couple of Dark Talons, dropping bombs on 2 different units and then shooting their guns at 2 other units, and then this going into another one, you could make 5 units that can't fall back.
If you get in a situation where you're doing that and you're charging 5 things and not killing them all, that is a very specific situation.
Yeah, it's super situational. So I think for 2 CP, it's expensive when you've got other things that can do it just as a byproduct of things you're going to be doing anyway.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about it for me is that you might not always want any of the planes in your list. You might always want to have in contest objectives.
Yeah,
and
I know.
The ability to stick a grenade launcher on a captain and then have this as a situational thing rather than plan for it is just it's a nice option to have. It's got its flaws. I like it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm pretty sure I've got my Ancient is modelled with a grenade launcher. Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, so after sorry.
The only other one is that it's very expensive, but is the Hunt, which is a pre-game move for Ravenwing, which is interesting, I suppose, if you've got the first turn and you really want to charge something. But I don't know how useful it is, considering Ravenwing in the first battle round get 3 inches of extra movement across the board. It's expensive. It's 2 CP or 3 CP if it's more than 5 models in the unit.
Yeah, I've actually forgotten the name of it. There's a similar one to that where you can double move with a biker unit, full throttle.
Full throttle, yeah.
And that with objective secured bikes can also be really powerful. Just a minimum squad of 3 bikes. They'll have a 24-inch threat range at least. The fact that they can, you can double move and you can go and steal a point from someone that's not expecting it is
I think that's potentially like a really good thing to do if you're going second and it's bottom of turn 5, and you need that 15 points. Having something just scoot to where you need it to be, then great. But you lose the damage output from that unit to do it. So that's the trade-off.
Yeah, so good variety of strats. So warlord traits.
Yeah, actually, some really good ones, which is really nice to see. There are a few Deathwing specific ones. There are a few Ravenwing specific ones. So you actually get 10 different warlord traits, which is brilliant. Like, I don't know. I suppose Death Guard's got 6 plus 7, so they got more. But yeah, that's really cool to see, because that's on top of all the ones you get for being a Space Marine as well. So you
get the Space Marine ones and you get the Phobos ones for Marines, if I remember right.
Yeah. And then obviously if you've got sort of heroes of the chapter, you can so if you upgrade your apothecary or whatever, you've got those options there. So you have a lot of options. I think a couple of my favorites. So if you've got a real melee beat stick character, you can make him a Calibanite Knight, who always wounds on 2+ against infantry or bikers. I don't know how that works going into Deathwing if you have a mirror match, but against everything else, that's pretty cool. Although it doesn't have any wording that says regardless of other rules, so I suspect other things might counteract this. Thinking about Harlequins, for example, with the Shadow Seer's aura.
My guess would be that transhuman overrides this.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, I think that could do with a clarification. Decisive Tactician, so +1 to advance and charge. Again, in a all Deathwing army, could be absolutely fantastic. And I've got a bit of a combo actually, which I'll come on to later, which involves this and a certain character. And yeah, I think they're all really good. A brilliant strategist is an interesting one, because that gives you some options around flexibility in what doctrine you're in, which is cool. You can go back a doctrine every turn for one unit, depending on where you are at. So only really useful from turn 2, but again gives you some flexibility, and that's probably more useful in a mixed wing army. And yeah, like I said earlier, the Fury of the Lion, add 1 to strength characteristics of models from Dark Angels units within 6 of this warlord. If this warlord made a charge move, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention. So there's a bit of a few hoops you have to jump through there, but potentially pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you had to roll on the table randomly, you wouldn't be that upset, would you?
No. I think it's a fantastic set of warlord traits. Lots and lots of flexibility there.
Yeah, I think the you used to have this one back when you could pick warlord traits pre-game. This one was really powerful. The watch one, the Deathwing, specific one where you can just deny a psychic power regardless of anything.
Yeah, I definitely plugged that into my matchup against Thousand Suns when he wanted to teleport a Mutalith Vortex Beast into my lines. I was just like, no, I don't think I'll bother with that this turn. Thanks.
Not the right meta for it in the fact that you can't sort of choose it on a whim anymore really diminishes its power. But with the ability to take multiple warlord traits in the, as I was going to say, as per Marines, as per all of the new books, having the option for this in the back pocket, and then if something like Eldar do come in very much into the thing with something like Doom that you just want to stop.
Yeah, it's fantastic for that. And as we'll get on to, you're gonna probably have some psychers knocking around this army because
The other nice thing about having a table of warlord traits where they're all good is that the named characters that have these traits, you're not upset if you make them your warlord.
No,
Whereas there's a lot of for comparison, if you take a list, if you take the Creations of Bar list, you have to have Fabius Bard as your warlord, and his warlord trait is dire. It's one of these -1 leaderships if you're within X things.
Oh god.
So yeah, psychic discipline. Now, normally we don't like to go through these sort of things word by word, but I think for here we might, just because when you look at this list, I think the worst power here is trepidation, which is smite, and that is, I think, the worst one of them. So I think that tells you something about the base level of the book.
Yeah, I mean, you are potentially going to want to find a way to get 2 psychers in a list. How many Space Marine armies are looking to do that? They are unbelievably good. Now, interestingly, some of them haven't really changed from what they were in their original incarnation, but the codex itself was so terrible that it didn't really matter that you had good psychic powers because everything else in the army was garbage. Now, with a good codex, the synergies are phenomenal.
So to go through them super quickly, there's Mindworm, where you select an enemy unit and it takes a mortal wound and fights last. Aversion, which debuffs a attack and -1 from the hit roll. Righteous Repugnance, where you buff one of your units to reroll hits and wounds in assault. Trepidation, we've already mentioned. Engulfing Fear, where you turn off Obsec and potentially stop things doing actions as well. And Mind Wipe, where you again select an enemy unit and turn off auras. If you went into a list and you could only make space for 1 librarian, which 2 would you go for?
That is the tricky thing. So that's why I'd take Ezekiel, or I'd upgrade a librarian to a chief librarian to give you more flexibility because you want at least 3 of these in some sort of combination. I think Mindworm against a combat heavy army is excellent. I think Righteous Repugnance, again, on a big blob of nasty close combat Terminators, is unbelievably good. I think Mind Wipe situationally is great. But turn off a Apothecary's aura.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, eat that.
Quite often as well these days you see things where you get a model and then it buffs itself to have a longer aura range, and then it thinks I'll take another aura to sort of double in.
But
you only turn off the 1 aura ability from the unit, but
you get to choose which one it is, right?
Still nasty.
But in terms of 9th edition, Engulfing Fear, so turning off Obsec, and potentially stopping people from performing actions, or if they're so if the result of the psychic test is equal to or greater than the unit's leadership characteristic, that unit can't perform actions, or if they're doing an action, that action immediately fails. So again, like the power in terms of point denial that 1 power have is exceptional. I'd be taking take a librarian who has the option to know 3. I mean, if you're taking a chief apothecary, well, a chief apothecary, and then you give him Tomb of Malcador, he could know 4 powers. He can only cast 2, so having that flexibility is not necessarily all that useful, because you probably want to get more off than just the 2 each turn. But yeah, you're taking a librarian with 3 powers minimum every game, I think.
Yeah.
If you can't.
Yeah, it's so hard to know which of these is just the best. I think Trepidation is the worst.
Yeah,
but still amazing. Then probably Aversion is the next weakest, but dear God, when you've got something that's -1 to hit plus -1 attack as the second worst power, that is a hell of a thing.
Yeah. Interestingly, it doesn't say to a minimum of 1, so you could make a unit have 0 attacks. But then you're probably not going to put it on a unit that only has 1 attack anyway, because how much of a threat are they?
Yeah, I can't think of anything that I'm like, ooh, it's got 1 attack that's at a really high damage or something that I'm scared about. I guess if you've got a character with 1 wound and you're charging him into something, it's a nice why not.
But that's a great one, and that pairs with the strat that stops models that are out of engagement range from fighting. So you put this on a unit, it charges in, then it's only its front rank of models can fight. You've a fraction of the attacks then going in. That's brutal, absolutely brutal.
I just think if I charged you with a unit of Pox, let's say, only the front row are going to get in. So for 1 CP, you could half my attack. For a spell, you could half the attacks again, because they go from 2 attacks to 1. And then you have -1 to the hit roll, so you take off a third of the hits as well. And we're probably still saying that's the second weakest power.
Yeah. It is an insanely strong discipline. It's not spamming mortal wounds everywhere. It's just really messing with your opponent's ability to play the game. It's very, very cool. I love it. I absolutely love it. I think it's amazing. Like nothing's super easy to cast. Well, I say that Mindworm and Aversion are both 6. Ezekiel gets +1 to cast. Thank you very much. The highest anything on here is a 7.
Yeah, it's I'm not going to enjoy facing these, but I love that they found a way to make the psychic stuff very different, very in flavor for the Dark Angels, and very powerful in a way that's very different to how we've seen powers previously. Because most of the times it was buffing a unit up to or doing mortal wounds. There's been nothing like this tree before in its entirety.
No.
It's going to be cool to see which ones rise up. I think I'd always try and have one with Righteous Repugnance for full rerolls, and then one of the debuffing things.
I mean, if you're not running,
I'd take.
if you're not running Deathwing, then Righteous Repugnance probably isn't quite so necessary. But then you're probably going to be running Deathwing.
Yes. So yeah, amazing tree, and I think we're both in favour of it. So relics.
Yeah.
I think there's one real standout here, and the others are good.
Yeah.
So you want to take it away?
Yeah. So we'll just do relics and special issue warrior at the same time. So the couple that stand out. So you're basically, if you're taking a Talon Master, you're taking this, which is Arbiter's Gaze, which means that when they shoot, they always hit on 2s, even in Overwatch. So yeah, he's having that. Another really interesting one on a character with a Crozius Arcanum or a Power Maul is and again, this is a bit situational. So if you're sort of fighting Fallen or Heretic Astartes, an unmodified wound roll of 4+ inflicts 2 mortal wounds on the target, and the attack sequence ends. So could be a nice, again, against things like Death Guard. their mortal wounds, so you're not reducing the damage on those hits that go through, which is fantastic. But the real secret sauce here is the Penance of Remembrance. So if you're playing Deathwing, you're going to be taking you're going to be taking the Penance of Remembrance, and he, in the command phase, picks a infantry unit. Well, they're all Deathwing. Deathwing are all infantry, apart from if you give upgrades to dreadnoughts, but that unit is -1 damage. So they have Death Guard and Death Guard damage reduction buffs and Space Marine transhuman physiology buffs on them. So yeah, good luck getting your way through that. Through a big blob of 10 fearless Terminators.
Yeah, I've played against that once already. I was playing a Death Guard list, which didn't have a lot of shooting. It had 2 Plague Burst Crawlers and some Incidental Bolter stuff. And I stopped shooting at the unit because with the Apothecary, they were coming back as quickly as I was killing them.
Yeah.
And I was just giving them chances to shoot with the Ancient.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I had chance things where they were literally the only things I could see, and I was choosing not to shoot with them.
Yeah. Waste of time.
Yeah, this I think that relic's going to be in every Dark Angel list until the new book comes out, whatever that is, 2024 or whatever. The other one that I think is really good is the one you can give to a Ravenwing biker, the Reliquary of Repentance, which reduces an in-run save by 1 if it's a save of 4 up or better. Oh no, sorry, it reduces it to a 5 up if the save is 4 up or better.
Yeah.
Which is really good. There are less 3 up in-runs in the game these days, but even just reducing a 4 to a 5, again, pretty handy on something like Morty.
Yeah.
You do have to be quite close for it.
You have to be danger close. Yeah, you need to be within 3 inches.
So it's probably only a melee thing, but you know, if you run up and you plasma gun something in point blank range, it's still good. And there's no reason that your Raven. It's not just the person. It's not -1 from the in-run from the person attacking it.
No, it's everything.
So you get him close and have some Terminators punch whatever you're debuffing in the face.
I think the only model you're going to stick this on is a Ravenwing champion.
You've got to start wondering where all your relics and warlord traits are going at this point.
This feels like a bit of a. It feels good, but I think there is so much other stuff that's better, and you've got to be really. You've got to be willing to sort of chuck that unit in and potentially lose them, because it's just a 5-wound model, right? It doesn't have an in-run.
It is a good meta for it at the moment, given there are lots of demons, Harlequins, and Mortarion about.
Yeah, it would be great against Harlequins. I mean, what you could do is take a captain on bike who'd be Ravenwing. He'd have a bit more durability, bit more about him, and give him that.
So I think that's it for relics. They've got some decent other ones. They've got a pretty decent sort of Assault Bolter and the like, ways to buff the priest and what have you. But they've got also some really good secondaries.
Yeah, they do.
So going over them super quickly, they've got one which is kind of a killer character one, which you're probably never going to take if you're playing someone with 2 big melee characters that they're going to shove in your face. Playing demons with 2 exalted, only 2 exalted, and they haven't gone for the Lord of Change, then this is maybe interesting, but I'll probably pass it otherwise. They've got a Ravenwing exclusive one, which is pretty good. Score 2 victory points each time enemy unit is destroyed by an attack Raven from a Ravenwing model that moved 12 or more or charged.
I mean, you could technically get all 15 in 1 turn.
Yeah, I think it's why some of the things are so wild. It's like that could be a once per turn, and that will still be, better than like the Death Guard one where you've got to kill something with a plague or a weapon and make it fail a morale test. But think the best one is still going to be Stubborn Defiance. Do you want to run us through that?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. It's one you're probably going to be taking with Deathwing, because you can stick a super durable objective secured unit on a home objective and not move them all game. But basically, that unit, you have to hold that objective consecutively all through all 5 turns to get max points on it. But like I say, you put a super, because you can now get objective secured Deathwing Terminators. Then if you're running, then you're taking this. Because they just have to hold that have to control that objective marker. Basically, in your second command phase, you'll get 2 victory points. In your third, you'll get 3 more. In your fourth, you'll get 5 more, and then in the fifth, you will get the final 5 to make it around 15. So they're all maxable, which is brilliant. So I think that one's great, because your opponent is going to be so worried about the Terminators that are all up in their grill that they're not going to have the resources to dedicate to try and dig something off of a backfield objective. And the resources you would have to put in would be considerable. Yeah. So I think that's brilliant. And if you are running an all Ravenwing list, then you're going to go for Death on the Wind, because you're going to want to kill stuff anyway. This is just, this gives you points for doing that. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, either of those two are brilliant, and the fact that you can build a list around them. So you build that big 10-land Terminator blob, you give them the -1 damage, you have the Apothecary, and then you make them a while we stand, we fight target. Yeah, and you're probably about as good as guaranteed to get 20 points from that alone as you can be. It is a nightmare to remove effectively.
And the thing I like about which now is making me think, I've probably run like a 10-man Deathwing Terminator unit, a 10-man Deathwing Knight unit, is that you have the flexibility to combat squad them at the start of the game, or I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it still exists, but there used to be a strat in the Space Marine Codex that you could combat squad something during the game. So if you've got the full unit, you really needed some parts of that unit to move off, but the other parts to hold that objective, you could split them up. And then again, with the while we stand, we fight, you've got to kill both sets of 5, not just one or the other. And then part of it can go off and do something else and slow up something that's coming towards the other 5, if that makes sense. So, and the great thing is, it's you're not doing an action while you're doing this, so these guys can still shoot and contribute to the army rather than just sort of stand there.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of one of the 2 reasons why I think this is better than Death on the Wind. Is one, well, neither of them are actions, in fact. But I think what's nice about Stubborn Defiance is, A, if you need to, you can put that big near on invincible Terminator blob on it and say best of luck to your opponent trying to get rid of it. But the other thing is, there are just some armies that never plan to get into your deployment zone, and you assume that's always going to be the objective marker that you pick. And if you're playing, you probably never play this list, but if you're playing, say, a guard army that doesn't have a lot of artillery, pretend those don't exist for a second. But a guard army is never planning to get into your deployment zone. If they don't have something that can remove a squad hidden away, then you can just stick a 5-man troop unit, 5-man intercessor unit. Hurrah! You've got 15 points.
But even if
that might be possible against as well. I'm picking 2 weak armies here,
but even if that guard army did have artillery, and those things back there are Terminators, like a Basilisk, it's got D6 shots.
Yeah.
But then they're only wounding on 4s. You've got a couple of Storm Shields in there. They're saving on 4s. You might have the Ancient in there to reduce damage by 1. It's got D3 damage, so you're doing max 2 damage